We are going to demonstrate how to install the balance bike adapter onto a bike. This particular bike is a specialized bike that we got for this purpose. So the first thing you're going to need to do is remove the pedal. Okay. So this particular pedal has reverse thread. That means that you need to go clockwise in order to take it off. You'll notice here I'm using a 15 millimeter pedal wrench. The reason I use that is because these nuts on the pedals are pretty narrow, so it's difficult sometimes to get a standard 15 millimeter wrench in there. So you pull that off. Next thing that I typically do is take off or loosen the chain guard. And you don't need a cordless for this purpose, but it speeds the process on the video, so that's why I'm using it. Make sure we set those 3 screws aside where we can find them. And then you could get a just an open-end wrench if you have one the right size, but if you don't have one the right size, you can just use an adjustable wrench here. And remember, again, these are reverse threads, so you're going to turn this clockwise in order to loosen it. Once you get it loosened, you can just take it off with your fingers. There is also a retention nut here that you just pull straight off, and it has a little knob on it that fits into the slot on the crank and keeps the bearing nut from over tightening. Then there's 2 slots in this bearing nut. You can just take a screwdriver and turn that off. Keep your hands out of the way so that you don't slip and cut yourself when you're doing that. Pull that out and you're good to go. And I realize that I lied about this. You do have to take both pedals off because the chain guard needs to come off. So the pedal on the opposite side is normal thread, so you would go counterclockwise as you are looking at it. There in this video it looks backwards because I didn't turn the bike around, but on the side with the crank, make sure that you go clockwise to remove the pedal. And then this whole crank assembly will come out. You see there's your bearing. You can then get the chain guard out of the way, pull the chain off the crank, and fish this crank out. Being careful of the bearings here. So I take the bearings out and I would put them in the bag that you got your balance bike adapter in, or in this case I'm just going to drop them in a Ziploc bag along with the other parts that I don't need, so that I'll have all of those in one spot later. It also keeps a little grease on those so that there's no rust that develops. And I would take a rag, just wipe out the bearing races on either side, take both sides of the balance bike adapter, and those came with some O-rings, and you'll see that there is a little slot there on the adapter that this O-ring fits into and holds it in place. So put both those on, take the bolt that came with it, the hex bolt, put it on, put them in either side, and this is a standard hex bolt, so you just tighten it counterclockwise, or I'm sorry, clockwise. Here I'm getting into my reverse thread mode. So put that up. You don't have to crank on it real hard, just get it snug. Okay. Then we need to remove the chain. So we have our chain tool here. It just fits over the chain like that. Let me get it started and we'll get a close-up for you. So you make sure that the pin of the chain tool is centered on the pin of the chain, and then turn that until you drive that pin out. Once you get the pin out, you may have to run some tests here because it may not come all the way out. You don't want to drive it out too far. So there, I don't have it out. I'll go ahead and crank it out the rest of the way. You'll come up to some resistance. Pull that out, and the chain comes out. And you have that little pin sitting there for when you re-connect this. So take your chain, you could put a little oil on it and put it in a separate Ziploc bag if you wanted to. Okay, the last thing you need to do is just put the chain guard on. This is an important last step because you'll notice we have these potentially sharp edges here of the chain guard that if your child was to fall while using the bike as a balance bike, could cause some injury. So we want to be sure that we put the chain guard back on. Okay, I just loosely tighten these at the start so that I can make sure everything lines up. And that's it. You have your bike transformed into a balance bike with the balance bike adapter there to protect it. You can see on this side how the O-ring is keeping moisture and grit from getting in there and messing up the races. Wipe this thing off and you're good to go. The last thing you might need to do would be to adjust the seat. You probably want the seat a little lower for balance bike purposes than you would want for a pedal bike. But after you get that, your bike is ready to go.